that's when it all started to change, because I was like, you know what? It's not about fitting myself into some other mold. It's about understanding who I am, what the purpose God has for putting my soul, my personality, my spirit into this body, and working with that, because working against it hasn't worked. Like, that's just taking up so much time and energy, and I'm failing.
Welcome to Compared to Who, the podcast to help you stop comparing and start living. I'm your host, Heather Creekmore. I hate to admit this, but I used to secretly obsess over my appearance. I thought it was part of my job as a woman to always look better, but never felt like I could be good enough. Maybe you can relate. But God, in His grace, He showed me a way out, and I want to give you all the tools you need to break free too. If you've ever spent too much time stressing over your looks, I get it. I hope you'll keep listening and find the same freedom I have. Here are 3 other things you need to know about me. I'm a minivan driving mom of 4. I'm author of the book Compared to Who and a blogger at comparedtowho.me. And you just may have seen my epic bake fail on Netflix. If you've ever struggled with comparison or body image issues, Compared to Who is the show for you. I hope you enjoyed today's episode and tell a friend about it. Hello and welcome to the Compared to Who podcast. I'm Heather Creekmore, and I am so glad that you're listening today because my guest today is super fun and she's got a lot of wisdom to share with us on the topic of body confidence. Rebekah is a copywriter and body confidence coach who helps women feel worthy in a world convincing them that they're never enough. She's been featured in Bustle, Thrive Global, The Every Girl, and so many more places. You can listen to her podcast every Thursday. She puts out a new episode of Confidently She. On that podcast, she asks you to question the beliefs that make you question your self-worth. And that is exactly the kind of question we like to tackle here at Compared to Who. Rebekah Buege, thank you so much for being on the Compared to Who show today.
You're welcome. Thank you so much for having me. I am so excited to be here, Heather, and talking with you so far has been great, and reading your book has been fantastic. So this is just an awesome opportunity to chat with you about all of this.
Well, I want to dig right into your story because I've been in this body image world, well, this Christian body image world, I should clarify, for a number of years now. And you are different than a lot of what's out there. And I love that about you. Okay, absolutely love that about you. But tell us like how you got there. What really started your struggle with body image and what brought you to the place where you would want to do a podcast and coach other women who are having these same struggles? Can you share your story with us?
Absolutely. I love to share my story. I believe that our stories are what help us be relatable to other women. And so while I haven't always been super comfortable being vulnerable, sharing my story, it's just kind of another testament to the confidence that I've been able to build over the last few years, just really not caring what people think about it, but just knowing that like it's going to help somebody who's going through a similar struggle. So super happy to share. Really, it all started probably back in high school, right? Your identity is formed so much in what people say about you in those years. You identify as maybe an athlete at that point, or you identify as a theater person or a good singer, or a smart kid. If you are one of the smart kids, that's how you identify, and that's how you build your sense of self-worth around kind of who you were in high school, because those are really formative years. And when I was in high school, I was pegged as kind of the pretty girl, the popular girl. I was smart. I was in choir and theater. And so my image was a lot that had to do with my identity as a high school student. Rebekah was the skinny, pretty girl. And that's kind of what I hung on to as I grew up. And I'm sure for a lot of people, it's hard to have much compassion or sympathy for the person who grew up as skinny and pretty. But as you build your identity around even the positive attributes of what we see our physical appearance as, you just hold more tightly to those things. And rather than wanting to be those things, you start to build the fear around losing those
Mm.
things. So it's still equally insecure. I want to
Mm-hmm.
point that out, that even the
Absolutely.
skinny pretty girls are still equally insecure. We're just afraid to lose what other people have built our identity around, because really it wasn't me sitting in my room saying, Rebekah, you're pretty. Rebekah, you're skinny. I mean, as a 16-year-old girl, I did not think that I was very pretty. I did not think that everything about me was great, but it was this other people told me, this is who you are. And so
Mm.
that's how I started to build my identity. And so once I got into college, I continued to kind of be known as, oh yeah, Rebekah's pretty, Rebekah's skinny. That's kind of who she is. And people would make comments like, oh, what do you have to be insecure about? Look at you, like you're so thin. And that just kind of speaks to what they believe confidence is, right? And what a lot of our culture believes confidence is looking a certain way. Confidence is getting compliments all the time. But I didn't realize just how much my identity and my confidence was rooted in the idea that other people thought I was attractive, until I got into a really, really toxic, emotionally abusive relationship in college. Because that was the first time in my life where someone who was very close to me criticized the way I looked and criticized who I was, and would openly compare me to other women, or compliment other women in front of me, or just, try to make me feel like who I was wasn't enough for him, or it just wasn't right. It wasn't what he would choose, but he was fine with it. Like, it felt like he was settling for who I was rather than being excited about who I was. And that was the first time that had happened to me, to be honest. And it was a really, really hard time. And I didn't realize just how deeply it had affected me until I left that relationship. So I got out of that relationship after a very intense 8 months. I was only with him for 8 months, but it still was a very, very deep relationship that we had. And once I got out of that, I didn't know who I was, because I had looked to this guy to kind of direct me and tell me what I was worth, and who I was to him was really all that mattered to me, because I'm the type of woman, and I think a lot of women are this way, where their romantic relationship is their priority in their life. And I think that's a good thing in moderation. I now believe that your relationship with God is the number one priority. And then, your husband or whatever romantic relationship, that takes second place. But at the time, my faith wasn't as important to me. And I was just obsessed with love and relationships and all of that. So I let this guy drive and direct my identity and my self-worth. And so when I removed him from the equation, I didn't know where to look. I was like, well, I've been looking to this guy for my identity for so long. I don't know who I am anymore. And suddenly the way I see myself, the thoughts that I have in my head, I don't even recognize them, because they have been tainted by what this guy would say about me, or these seeds of doubt and not being good enough have been planted. And the reason they were able to take root so deeply is because I had already allowed the groundwork of having my identity be rooted in my appearance to exist. I don't believe that those seeds would have taken root so deeply if I wasn't already identifying so heavily as my body, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. Body image been bogging you down for too long? It's time to get free, my friend. Go to comparedtowho.me, take your free body image awareness quiz. You will learn amazing things. You'll get your results right away. And I think you'll have fun too, because who doesn't love to take quizzes? Go to comparedtowho.me. There's lots of great resources on that site. Articles about body image and comparison, and how you can find freedom through the gospel of Jesus Christ. Check it out today, right after this episode, of course.
So I was at this place where I was just wrecked, right? Like I was heartbroken. I didn't know who I was. I knew that if I got into another relationship, I would just be looking to him to define me and to give me worth and validate me. So I remember just like crying on the phone to my mom, and I was like, I don't even know who I am anymore. I don't know what's true. Like these thoughts in my head don't sound like me, and I know that they aren't true, but like, what do I do? And so in all of her simple wisdom, she just said, well, I don't know what to tell you, except I know what God says is true. So why don't you look there? And at the time I was like, okay, great. Thanks for the advice, Mom. Like, what am I supposed to do with that? Like,
give me something tangible, Mom. Really?
Yeah. Read the Bible. Is that really your advice right now? Like, I was just like, okay, like, but you know what, looking back, like what simple distilled true advice is that, right? Like in this world where you can decide whatever you want, you know, like you can decide your own truth and be your own whatever, like the only thing that we can trust to be true is what God says of us. And so I started reading and going through, because reading the Bible to me just sounded super overwhelming. I was like, I don't know what to read. I don't know where to start. Like, whatever. So my mom had given me Jesus Calling. I think it's by Sarah Young.
Sure.
And I was like, okay, this is like a bite-sized kind of way to walk me through kind of what God says. And so I started going through that. And some of the, you know, it's a daily, for those of you who don't know, it's a daily like excerpt. So today, as we're recording this, is December 16th. So I would look to December 16th and read what it says. And there are some Bible verses that kind of back up the message for that day. And some of those messages were just so divinely applicable to exactly how I was feeling in a certain day, or exactly where I was, that I was just like, wow, I really do feel like God is kind of doing something here. Like, I don't know what, but I feel like he's doing something. And just this idea that in Christ we are a new creation gave me so much freedom. I had known that my whole life, like in theory, I had known, okay, yeah, like you're new and whatever, but I had never felt the need to be renewed until that point. I had never felt so broken. So I didn't realize the power of being fixed, if that makes sense. And
absolutely.
So I went through reading all of this and understanding like, wow, God made me specifically to look the way I do. And so who am I to be second guessing or to be criticizing or to be wishing that, you know, I had bigger boobs than I do, because that was a big insecurity. I was like, oh, if real women have curves, then what am I? Because I don't really have curves. I'm a size 2 and I'm a size 34B. And like, what does that say about me? And that was a big thing, that this guy was like really into like curvy women and whatever. And so I'm like, you know, this guy doesn't have the authority to tell me what my body should look like. Maybe he's attracted to women who look like that. That's great for him. That's fine. But that means I'm not for him. And that was the biggest realization, that it's like, you know what, Rebekah, you can try to like change yourself into being the type of woman that he's attracted to, or you could just find guys who are attracted to who you already are. And like when I kind of had that mindset shift, that's when it all started to change, because I was like, you know what? It's not about fitting myself into some other mold. It's about understanding who I am, what the purpose God has for putting my soul, my personality, my spirit into this body, and working with that, because working against it hasn't worked. Like, that's just taking up so much time and energy, and I'm failing. I would always say, like, Mother Nature wins in the end. Like, who do you think you are? Like, it's not going to be easy to do that. So you may as well work with what you have. And so that's what ended up giving me this peace of mind. And obviously, I mean, it was a long process, and I still say, like, confidence is not a personality trait, it's a practice, because I felt confident before this relationship. I felt self-assured. I trusted myself. After this relationship, I didn't even trust the thoughts in my head. I didn't trust myself to do anything, let alone just like the body image stuff was a whole nother thing. But you can lose your confidence. So that means you can build it. If it's something you can lose, that means something you can gain. So that was the biggest like piece of assurance that I kind of had. That was like, wow, so this isn't a fixed asset. That means that this is something people can build. So then that's what made me want to do the podcast, to share with other women that it's like, listen, I figured something out here. Like, the world is going to tell you to be skinny and to make a lot of money and to live in a certain type of house and have a certain type of job. But even if you have all those things, and especially with the body image, and especially with the weight loss or the looking young or looking fit, whatever it is, like, you can have that and still be miserable. So that means it must not be the body that gives you confidence. So I was like, I need to share this with people. Other women need to know this. And so that's what started the podcast. And I've been talking for a long time. So that's
awesome. No, that's awesome. And I mean, it's so true, but it's so funny because it's one of those things where it feels obvious. Like, oh, of course, what we look like doesn't give us value. And I mean, were you raised in the church, Rebekah?
I was.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, I mean, like if you're raised in the church, I mean, I was too. It's like, you hear that, it's what's on the inside that counts. And God made us all fearfully and wonderfully. And like, all that stuff. But it's so funny when you finally have that moment, right? That like click of, oh, I'm worth more than just what I look like. And I mean, it's
like what other people think of me. And well, I think it's because we're conditioned, right? So like, we can think one thing and hear one thing in church, but then the way we're treated in the world and the way people talk about us, the way people say, oh, she's a 6 or, oh, she's a 10, like people talk about women specifically in terms of their appearance and their bodies. And so it's like, you can intellectually know something, but your experience defines your identity more than that intellectual part of it.
Hey there, how much is freedom worth to you? That's kind of an odd question, right? When I was in the midst of my struggle with disordered eating and body image, I would have paid anything I had to be free. Truth is, I spent a lot of my budget on things I thought could help me be free, like new diets, exercise gizmos, clothing, but none of those things really helped. I'm so grateful that God showed me the way out. And now I'm passionate about helping others find their way out too. I want them to know that Jesus already paid it all. They don't have to spend another cent to find the freedom they really desire. But truth is, it does cost me something to get this message out, compared to who can't spread the message of Jesus' offer of freedom without the help of women like you. Would you consider making a contribution? Check out Compared to Who's Patreon page at patreon.com/comparedtowho. Then prayerfully consider giving $1 or $5 a month, whatever you can to help. Any amount you'd be willing to donate would be a huge blessing and will go directly towards covering the operating expenses of this ministry. Thank you for being a part of seeing other women set free from the chains of body image and comparison. May God bless your generosity. You shared about how being the pretty girl, being the popular girl, how that kind of started to define your identity in high school. And I think that's something that a lot of times people overlook the truth in that, sometimes those who were defined that way for most of our formative years are going to struggle more than people who weren't. And it almost seems
Mm-hmm.
like a contradiction. Like,
Mm-hmm.
the pretty girls shouldn't struggle with body image. The skinny girls
Yeah.
shouldn't struggle with body image. But I know that I have done personal training with women over age 50 who, like, that was how they defined themselves all their lives. And then they hit menopause and they're no longer the skinny girl anymore.
So then who are they?
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
midlife. And they've spent
Mm-hmm.
their whole life identifying themselves as the thin one, the pretty one. It's like, what do I have left? What do I do now? And it's a real crisis moment for them. So that's, I think, really important to kind of point out that it's not okay to get by on your looks, if you will.
Oh.
And it's so funny because I don't remember if I wrote this in my book, but it's something I talk about when I speak a lot. A lot of women will check out of Target and look at those magazine covers and have kind of mean thoughts. If we're intellectually honest, we have kind of mean thoughts about those pictures, right? It's like,
Yeah.
ugh, well, she looks too good. And, oh, like, I don't need to see that. You throw the bag of M&Ms on the conveyor belt because it's like, oh, it's so frustrating to see this perfect looking woman. But what
Mm-hmm.
we fail to do is we fail to read those headlines around her, right? The headlines that say, like, why she almost ended it all, or her
Yeah.
battle with depression, or how he cheated on her, why he cheated on her. We fail to see them as real humans, body, soul, spirit, emotion, mind, the whole package. And we objectify those women and we assume, we project on them that because
Mm-hmm.
they have this certain look, they don't struggle. And to struggle is human, right?
Yeah.
And so to
Yeah.
assume someone doesn't struggle is really dehumanizing of them. I mean,
Yeah.
it's
Or that their
objectification.
struggle is somehow easier
Yeah.
because they look a certain way. And now I can't speak to an experience of being in any other body but my own. I realize that. But there's a different level of pressure when you have the things that people seem to want. You feel this level of like expectation that it's like, if I don't show up and look a certain way, people are going to say something.
Ah.
Whereas if someone who if people aren't always making comments about how good you look or how skinny you are, no one's going to make any comments if you show up looking different one day. Does that make sense? It's like there's
Oh,
more
absolutely.
tension. So there's more expectation, there's more pressure, and then there's more that sense of like, well, that person didn't say anything, so like did they think that I looked bad or whatever? So like there's more emphasis on how you look, and it comes down to, the more you emphasize your body, the more flaws you find and the more insecure you are. And so that's why these beautiful women are so insecure, because they are treated like an object. They don't feel like they have a platform to share their insecurities, because they know that it's not going to always be met with understanding or compassion. And that's another reason why I wanted to start the podcast, because I was like, I don't feel like I have a place to talk about my insecurities, because I feel like people are just going to be saying things like, oh, what do you have to be insecure about? Look at you. Because that's what I've heard my whole life. But it's like, insecurity isn't about thinking that you're ugly or thinking that people don't like you. It's just like, I don't know if I can keep this up. Right. And
Absolutely.
I'm afraid of what will happen when I don't. I feel like I'll just disappear. So that's totally right.
Yeah, that your value would disappear. And it's funny
Exactly.
because it's like, it's really, you are what you eat, figuratively, right? Because I think for women who have, always been noticed for their looks, and like you said, I've always gotten those compliments, always gotten that response from other people about their looks, like that's what you feast on, right? You
Yeah.
feast on, that's what gives you your energy to keep going, right? Like everyone's going to say I look pretty. Everyone's going to say I look nice, and that's what I need to make it through, whatever event or whatever evening or whatever, like, month of my life.
Yeah.
But it's interesting. But I love how you brought up like Jesus Calling, and I was never into Jesus Calling, but the predecessor of Jesus Calling way back when was a book called God Calling, which doesn't even have an author. It's authored by these women called the Two Listeners, and I mean, like, literally it's from the early 1900s. And
Oh, wow. Okay.
that book had like the same impact on me, but there were days when I was like, oh, seriously, God, like how did you make that happen? Like, how did you make this fate
Yes.
match with this exact thing in my life? So
It's
I
amazing.
totally get that. But it's so true though. If you feast on what God says about you, it doesn't matter what other people say about you, right? But if you're feasting on that steady diet of, okay, he thinks this about me, she thinks this about me, then that confidence, like you said, it can't grow. That
Mm-mm.
confidence shrinks because you always have to keep working harder and you're on that treadmill trying to keep it up so the confidence keep coming so you can keep eating, right? Figuratively, of course.
Right. Right.
Um, but if you go to God's word and what he says about us, it's like the pressure is off. That you don't have to
Yes.
worry so much about what other people say. So I love that. That's awesome.
Well, and
So
also
go ahead.
other people's expectations of you are conflicting as well. Like that's one thing that I
Mhm.
realized. I was like, I can't be at the same time Kate Hudson beautiful and Kim Kardashian beautiful. Like
Mm,
those things are they're in opposition with each other. And some people will look at Kate Hudson and say, she's the most beautiful woman on earth. And other people will look at Kim Kardashian and say, she's the most beautiful woman on earth. And so it's like, if these two very different forms of or expressions of beauty can both be seen as beautiful, but also both be rejected, like some people could look
mm,
at Kim Kardashian and say, not into it. Same thing with Kate Hudson, not into it. It's like, wow, so none of this actually is real. It's just like people's opinions. And I
mm,
think when I finally realized that too, I was like, it just gave me so much freedom because it was like there are so many different ways to be beautiful, but also the underlying foundation of that is beauty is not my end goal as a
mm,
woman. Like that is not what I owe the world. I love to feel beautiful. I love to experiment with the way that I look, but like being beautiful so that other people give me approval is no longer something that I'm here to do. And
mm.
that was like a big breakthrough that I made as well.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, I made a little meme at graduation time several years ago. Like, how ridiculous would it be for, the graduation programs that show like what a woman wants to do when she graduates, like she's going to go on to, major in nursing or whatever it is. Like, how ridiculous would it be for that graduation program to say, when Kylie graduates, she hopes to be a swimsuit model and wear a size 2, or, when Madison graduates, she hopes to have firm abs. I mean, it's so silly. And like you would never do that, right? Like, oh no, we're
Yes.
women. We're smart, we're intelligent, we have so much ambition and we can do anything. But it's like, how many women out there, like they can do anything, right? Absolutely. They can, they're smart, they can go accomplish great things. But how many of them are consumed with what they look like, and that those goals
Yeah.
kind of eclipse other goals and purpose for their life? I mean, is that what you see in working with women like you do?
Yeah. I think that when it comes to success, there's a certain level of like professional success that we all want to achieve, and that's more within our control than the success we have within like our personal lives, right? So like you can work really hard and achieve a lot in your career, in your profession, but when it comes to like your personal life and like the satisfaction that you have, that's when the real stuff kind of comes out, because you can be a millionaire, billionaire in your penthouse apartment and still come home at the end of the day and go, oh, I wish I would have had time to go to the gym.
Hmm.
Like it's always like that's when you've checked those boxes of career success, or even like getting married, relationship success, quote success. um it's how you're feeling at the end of the day. That's what matters, because then you can also equally be working a very regular normal job and have a lot of bills to pay, maybe even a lot of credit card debt, and come home at the end of the day and say, I'm okay. Like I'm at peace with who I am and with my body. And I feel like the more driven and ambitious you are, the harder you are on yourself when it comes to the expectations you have for your body too. So it's almost this double-edged sword, because the women who are so driven and so successful sometimes got there because they held themselves to a high standard, but they just don't know how to release themselves from that same like career high standard when it comes to who they are as a person, and like the fact that their body was never made to be perfect, and that's not what they don't need to have that too in order to fully enjoy their life.
Yeah, that's good. That's true. I posted something on Instagram and Facebook the other day, and it kind of applies here, but it was like, how much did Florence Nightingale weigh when she founded modern nursing? How
Mm-hmm.
much did Rosa Parks weigh when she took a seat on that bus? And it's
Yep.
just like, we so often forget that what we accomplish in this world will have very little to do with how we looked. And and I think it's interesting because you said something at the beginning that triggered this thought for me, that like God did make us look
Mm-hmm.
exactly like we look for his purpose. But it always strikes me as funny when I would go to Christian like women's pep rallies, if you will. That's what I call them. I know that might be bad, but
Yeah.
where they would say like, "Oh, women are beautiful. God made us all beautiful," and that always frustrated me because I used to think about Leah in the Bible, and I think God uses the conjunction in Genesis 29:17. Rachel was beautiful in form and appearance, but Leah's eyes were weak, and it's like, I think that God did make us all beautiful according to his definition of beautiful, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like he gave us each this beautiful purpose and a beautiful soul and a beautiful spirit to worship him. And that's really what defines us. But physically, when we try to like make the blanket statement that God made us all equally beautiful, I don't think that that's true. And that's kind of painful to say. That's not a super popular sentiment, right? But
Yeah.
but if we try, I don't know if you've ever seen the Incredibles movie. I've got 4 kids, and so
I love the
we
Incredibles
watch them all,
movie.
right?
Yes.
But like, there's one scene in the first one where Dash says something like, something about being special, and his
Mm.
mom is like, "We're all special, Dash," and Dash replies, "Well, if everyone's special, then no one's special."
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, God didn't create Esther and Leah the same,
Right.
right? But God had a really specific reason why Esther needed to be as hot as she was, right?
Yeah.
You know, like
Yeah.
like she saves her people, and she needed that beauty to do that. And I think, I mean, for me, like, this is how I like to say it, and it sounds so silly, but when I recognize that God did not give me the physical features of a Victoria's Secret model, like that somehow freed me from trying to meet that standard, because it was like, you know what?
Yes.
I don't think I'm ever going to do any modeling. It's just not going to
Right.
happen. I'm 5'5". I haven't weighed what a Victoria's Secret model weighed since I was in, I don't know, 2nd grade.
Yeah.
So it's like, it's just not going to happen for me. And I mean, my goodness, I'm like halfway to 50, or more than halfway to 50. I'm halfway through my 40s to 50. So it's like
Yeah.
aging happens. It's real. And it's
Right.
like, but finally coming to the place where it's like, oh, God has a purpose for me in this shell that he's given me to walk around in on the earth. And that's a good purpose, even if
Mm-hmm.
that shell doesn't look like I think it should, or the culture tells me it should, or like you said, I mean, and this was so good too, what you had to say about what other people think I should look like.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, it doesn't matter. God has a purpose for
Right.
me exactly how I look today. And I hope that some women listening to this will find freedom just in that truth. Well, Rebekah, as we wrap up today, any last thoughts? Like what is your I don't want you to give away all your secrets, because I know you do coaching, and I'm hoping that some women are interested in taking you up on that coaching opportunity, because I think it'd be great. But what's one thing that you love to encourage women with that we could end this episode with today?
I like to say that you were created on purpose for a purpose.
That's good.
And so, whatever your body looks like, there's a reason for that. And like you mentioned, we are not all equally beautiful, but we are all equally worthy in his eyes.
Mm.
And the world is going to try to convince you that beauty is the ultimate achievement you can reach as a woman and hold on to as a woman. But just not true. Like, it's not true when you're asking the creator of you and me, the creator of the world. That's not what he sees, because it even says, man looks at the outside appearance, but the Lord looks at the heart. And so I believe that there's a beauty that's seen, right? There's like physical beauty that's seen. Then there's also beauty that is felt. And that comes when you are truly at peace with who you are, so much that you allow other people to feel that level of rest and finally feel a little bit better about who they are. So we all have the capacity to let other people feel that rest and that beauty that we have within us.
That's good. Well, Rebekah, tell people where they can connect with you.
The best way to connect with me is through my podcast, so Confidently She, and then also through Instagram or my website, RebekahBuege.com. You can email me there as well too.
Awesome. And I'll put all the links in the show notes so you guys know how to spell that right and all that good stuff.
Yes.
Well, Rebekah, thank you so much for being on the show today. It's a pleasure to talk to you, and I wish you well in all that you're doing. I think you're going to be used mightily of God to set a lot of women free, Rebekah. So thank you for being willing to be his hands and feet in this hard arena. So thank you for that.
Yes. Thank you, Heather. This has been wonderful.
That's all for today's episode. I hope we'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.